Hi Yvette, thanks for your question. To solve this problem, I see that you already found that one rational root was 6. So when you found out 6, you should have used synthetic division. And synthetic division for this problem is set up as 1 since the coefficient in front of the x cubed is 1, 0 since there's not an x squared term, and then we should have negative 37 and then a 6. So when you do synthetic division, we'll bring down the 1 and then multiply. 6 times 1 is 6, and then you add. So 0 plus 6 is 6, and then you multiply again. 6 times 6 is 36, and then you add. Negative 37 plus 36 is negative 1, and so 6 times negative 1 is a negative 6, and then 6 minus 6 is 0. These three coefficients are the coefficients of our new equation that we can factor to find the other roots. So we already know that one root is x equals 6. To find the other roots, we first want to write these coefficients as the equation they represent. So we do 1 less than x cubed, so this is going to be 1x squared, or just x squared. And then plus 6x, since this is positive, and then minus 1 here. So I think you had the incorrect quadratic equation. Once we have this equation, we're going to use the quadratic formula to solve for x. Okay, so we have x squared plus 6x minus 1 equals 0. We want to identify the values for a, b, and c. A is the number in front of the x squared term, which is 1. B is the number in front of the x, which is 6, and c is the constant term, which is negative 1. You take the sign with it. Now we're going to plug those values into the quadratic formula, which is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. When you plug those values in, we should get negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 1. First, we're going to do 6 squared. 6 times 6 is 36, so we have negative 6 plus minus the square root of 36 minus 4 times 1 times negative 1. So 4 times 1 times negative 1 is a negative 4. And we're going to divide that by 2 times 1, which is 2. Now we'll look at the inside of the square root, and we're going to do 36 minus a negative 4. Whenever we have minus a negative, that becomes a plus. So we have 36 plus 4. And that gives us 40. So now our problem is negative 6 plus or minus the square root 40 all over 2. And we're going to simplify the square root of 40. So off to the side here, I have the square root of 40. And I'm going to break 40 down into two numbers that when multiplied together give me 40. So I know that 8 times 5 is 40. So this is 8 and 5. So I'll just write those two factors down. Now I want to factor these factors even further until they're all prime factors. So 8 can be factored into 4 times 2. 5 is a prime number, so it can't be factored any further, but I'll still bring it down. Now I'm going to look at each factor again. So 4 can be written as 2 times 2. 2 is already a prime number, so I'll bring that down, and then 5 is already a prime number, so I'll bring that down again. These are now all prime numbers, or prime factors. So when I multiply 2 times 2 times 2 times 5 together, I should get 40. So I'm going to rewrite the square root of 40 as the square root of 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. So in my problem, I now have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. It doesn't change the problem, I'm just breaking it down so I can simplify the square root. So I'm still looking at the values underneath the square root and I want to simplify it. The square root tells me to take out pairs of 2 of a kind. So I have 2 2's here. So when I take out this pair, it becomes a single 2 on the outside of the square root. So this means I have -6 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 2 times 5, which is 10, and that's all over 2. Now I'm going to simplify this by looking at the coefficients and reducing those coefficients. So you can see this a little better. I'm going to split this up. So the 2, the denominator, is under the 6, the -6, and it's also under the 2 square root 10. So I'm just going to split this up so we can see that we really have 2 separate fractions. And we're going to reduce each fraction. So -6 divided by 2 is a -3. So the first fraction just becomes a -3. And then I have plus or minus. And now I have 2 square root 10 divided by 2. Now I'm only going to look at the coefficients or the whole numbers to reduce this. So you're only looking at the 2 on top and the 2 on bottom. Well, if I do 2 divided by 2, that equals 1. So these 2's are going to cancel out, and I just have a 1 times square root 10 on top. Now 1 times any number is just that number, so I don't really have to write that number 1 there. I can just write the square root 10. So that means that my answers, my simplified answers, are now -3 plus square root 10, comma, -3 minus square root 10. And then don't forget to also type in the value that you found in the previous steps, which was 6. So your 3 answers are these 3, -3 plus square root 10, -3 minus square root 10, and then 6.